All right. Let's see what this has got for me. So, I'm very bored right now, and I figured, why not look at what the liberal socialists are doing? Because I've done a stream on this type of thing before, and I feel like this is gonna be very, very bad. But who knows? Who knows? Um, I guess before we start, just as context, I tend to like unlearning economics. Um, he's not perfect by any means, but I think he tries. I think that he, has done research on things that he cares about. Um, and that's pretty good. It's better than nothing. Um, Matt McManus rather. All I've seen from him is stuff that he's posted on Twitter, mostly talking about so-called liberal socialism. So, yeah, we're just gonna see what's up with this, and if this gets really boring, then maybe I'll react to that ABA conference finally. Uh, yeah. And we're definitely going 2 times speed on this one, 'cause otherwise I'm gonna go insane.
Brilliant. The political theory of liberal socialism. Just had to go and get it. I really liked this. I think it was very with the zeitgeist. I think long overdue, the idea of liberal socialism. But the first question I want to ask you is,
Oh no, Yui. No, Yui. Are you gonna make me? uh, no, Yui. No, don't be taken in. Don't be taken in.
were you trying to piss everyone off?
No, but I mean, I was kind of happy accident that I did because, like you said, it's produced a lot more interest in the books than I probably otherwise would have. I will, to my dying day, claim some pride and credit in managing to unite neoliberals and ultra Marxists for one brief moment and being like, "Fuck no, never going to happen." And that's something to carry with you.
Yeah, I mean, I want to spend. This is a work, right, of political philosophy. It's a work of retrieval. That's the way you put it. So you're trying to retrieve this tradition of liberal philosophy throughout the years, and each chapter more or less is about a certain thinker or a type of thought, right? So it's not really extremely online stuff. It's just that it would annoy the extremely online. But could you? Because I think that once you get down to it, once you get past these very silly debates, a lot socialists and liberals do seem to agree on quite a lot fundamentally. Could you talk us through the way you see?
Like what? I mean, like in a very broad sense, if you redefine all the terms, like I've heard I've heard people say, for example, that like socialism or communism is, upholding the promises made by liberalism. Um, and I think there's some amount of, rhetorical force in that, but you gotta be more specific about what they agree on, because there's a lot that they disagree on, like specifically what is the best way of guaranteeing specific things that people actually need. What is the role of the state, of markets? How should the economy be organized? um like all of these different things are huge points of disagreement that are not bridgeable between liberals and socialists. So you gotta have something pretty good here to say that there is a bridge to be made.
Do that.
Sure. Well, there are two motivations for writing the book. One of them was a lot of my additional research is actually writing about right-wing thinkers, and not just the Thomas Sowells of the world. Although I really enjoyed your series on that, Evernote also, but a lot of people on the far right, Nietzsche, Heidegger, and a lot of the shittier derivatives, let's just put it that way, the Bronze Age pervert.
Sorry, what? I mean, oh no. Oh no. Look, just because Nietzsche was not a socialist does not mean that he was a right-wing thinker. He his thought inspired so many socialists and communists and left-wing thinkers. Like the entire like French quote unquote postmodernist milieu is inspired by Nietzsche, like very explicitly. Like the left Nietzscheans are pretty big. Just because some right-wing thinkers um appropriated things from Nietzsche does not mean that Nietzsche is a right-wing thinker. In the same way that right-wing thinkers have appropriated from Marx, you know? Like it is not impossible. Whatever.
And one of the things you find in right-wing thought is they will always emphasize that for them there's very little distinction between liberalism and socialism. In a sense, socialists are just liberals in a hurry. Now there are crude versions of this that you can see. Think about again people like Thomas Sowell or people like James Lindsay who will just sit there and call anyone.
Sorry. So is his argument just going to be that because right-wingers think that they're the same thing, that this means that they actually are the same thing? Like, because obviously to a right-wing thinker, they look similar in that both are anti-right, but they don't actually have that much in common. Like, I don't know.
To the right of Ronald Reagan or the left of Ronald Reagan, essentially a communist, right? But there are deeper thinkers like Heidegger who made exactly the same point, right? That liberalism and socialism were metaphysically the same. And I just came around to agreeing with that position. I just didn't think that that was a bad thing.
I can't speak on Heidegger. Hello, Shakespeare.
I thought it was something that was worth exploring as a leftist. The other thing that I really wanted to kind of unpack in this book, beyond just talking about it intellectually, was whenever I talked to
Okay, so more or less, his argument is just that he agrees with right-wing thinkers when right-wing thinkers equate liberalism with socialism. I mean, do you not think that right-wing thinkers have a vested interest in misportraying what socialists and liberals actually think? Because like this is the kind of thing that like ANCAPs do, for example. They like to say that liberals and socialists are the same. Well, liberals in the sense of like neoliberals, or more like I don't know, like state interventionist liberals, social democrats, etc., etc. Right? They like to say they're the same thing because to them, everything that's not right-wing anarchism is literally fascism. Like fucking Rothbard called the New Deal fascism, but then refused to call, like barely called the Nazis fascist. So, like why are we trusting right-wing thinkers to define our political movements for us? Like why should we think that they have a good grasp on this?
my left wing friends, I would sit there and be like, okay, I get that there are a lot of criticisms of bourgeois and petty bourgeois thought that one can make, and I would agree with a lot of those. But do we really think that freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the right to vote, all that stuff is just a whole load of crap, and we should do away with it? And usually most of
Um, I think that this is fundamentally a misframing, right? Like freedom of what did he say specifically? I'm gonna turn down the speed just a little bit. Two times is a little too much.
freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the right to vote.
Um, so freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the right to vote. See, the problem is that when you talk about these things, you're almost presupposing a state structure that could, in its power, prevent you from assembling, or prevent you from voting, or uh, prevent you from expressing yourself. You know, like obviously, I want people to be able to do these things. I think want people to be able to vote on things that affect their lives, and I want people to be able to assemble, and I want people to be able to express themselves freely. But in order to make these as guarantees, um, like enumerated guarantees, it's already implying a state structure that is not uh one that I would endorse. And even like this is not by any means just a leftist critique. Like even Hamilton, like Alexander Hamilton was argued against a Bill of Rights on these specific grounds, that enumerated rights would imply that things not enumerated were under the purview of government restriction, and he didn't want that, right?
All that stuff is just a whole load of crap, and we should do away with it. And usually most socialists I would encounter would be like, well, no, actually, those things will not only be safe with us, they'll be safer with us than they will in the hands of the people like Kamala Harris, Biden, et cetera, et cetera. So I just kind of wanted to make explicit a lot of those convictions in a way that maybe they hadn't before. Although it's, of course, up to the people whether the project's successful.
So this
Yeah, so what about the things like capitalism, and the role of the state, like the two really important things, or private property, you know money, the commodity form. Hey, Alferia, what's up? You're gonna you went from bitching about NoF to me bitching about liberal socialism, quote unquote. um yeah.
this idea which you keep talking about, and maybe I don't know enough about philosophy. I feel like I might not understand it fully, but it's this idea of what you call methodological collectivism and normative individualism.
Okay. Huh. Okay.
I feel like I might not understand it fully, but it's this idea of what you call methodological collectivism and normative individualism. So this characterizes liberal socialism for you. I think it seems to be the most common thing that you repeated in the book. Is that fair?
Yeah, so any good socialist would um dissolve this distinction, as Marx does. Even going back to Marx, he dissolves the distinction between the collective and the individual. Because one's individual life activity is immediately the life activity of the species. This is very basic. Like presupposing the individual is very liberal, and it's something that we as socialists generally want to avoid doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be clear, like that's not an idea that's original to me. It's actually a term or a set of terms I took from Tony Smith, the great Marxist philosopher, really underrated actually, who wrote a
Tony Smith. Okay. Let's see who that is. Tony Smith. Philosophy. Tony Smith is an American philosopher and emeritus professor of philosophy at Iowa State University. He is known for his works on capitalism, Hegel, and Marx. So his books, Beyond Liberal Egalitarianism, Marx and Normative Social Theory in the 21st Century. Globalization, a systemic Marxian account, not Marxist. Um, Technology and Capital in the Age of Lean Production, a Marxian critique of new economy, or of the new economy. Dialectical Social Theory and its critics, from Hegel to analytical Marxism and postmodernism. Okay, interesting. Essays from a Habermasian perspective. Okay, I know nothing about this guy. If he's trying to counter analytical Marxism, that's probably good. But I have a feeling Matt McManus is going to be relying on analytic Marxism heavily, just because I know that this is the kind of stuff that they thrive with, thrive with. Yeah. Also, he's also discussing them as abstract because in Athens they had a kind of democracy, just not one of mass open suffrage, let alone have a state as we understand it. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't really know much about Athens, so I can't really say much about that. But you know, anyway, continuing.
Very good book called Beyond Liberal Egalitarianism that people should check out because I thought it was really just a path-breaking book. But one of the things that Smith points out, actually from a Marxist perspective, is that it's not really fair to lump what he calls liberal egalitarians with classical liberals or neoliberals, precisely because they're methodological collectivists and normative individualists. And I just extended that idea
Hold on.
with classical. One of the things that Smith points out, actually from a Marxist perspective, is that it's not really fair to lump what he calls liberal egalitarians with classical liberals or neoliberals, precisely because they're methodological collectivists and normative individualists. And I just
I don't see why it's unfair to lump them together. Like I well, for one, they have to be like liberal egalitarians here. I'm imagining means people like G.A. Cohen, like Ronald Dworkin, like Elizabeth Anderson, those kinds of people. Um I don't see why it's unfair to lump them in with uh with neoliberals um and classical liberals, because in uh in the respect that matters, which is the presupposition of the market, and uh I don't understand how somebody like G.A. Cohen is a methodological collectivist as opposed to a methodological individualist. um Like, he doesn't propose that individuals or collectives are the basic units of society, as far as I'm aware. Like, when he talks about, um, like in like a, I think it's like On the Currency of Egalitarian Justice or something. His entire project is one which is rooted in understanding, um, like welfare distribution, or like the object of welfare distribution as being essentially equalizing luck um that people have. So I guess maybe that would be the normative individualism, but I don't know how you can do the normative individualism without a kind of methodological individualism, because you need to be able to quantify how um how people relate to one another, right? Like, I don't understand.
extended that idea to the broader tradition of liberal socialism. But what it means, very simply, is methodological collectivism is predicated on the idea that we need to understand human beings in their social situatedness, right? By and large, liberal socialists agree with Aristotle and Marx that human beings are social animals, and that we can only flourish when the setting in which we operate is well designed or well organized. But they're normative individualists in the sense that they think, and this is a
Yeah, what's the difference? Here all night. Here all night. Um, Sorry. He says something Aristotle here. What?
technical philosophy, Aristotle and Marx, that human beings are social animals, and that we can only flourish when the setting in which we operate is well designed or well organized. But there
Well, hold on. Well designed and well organized are not the same thing. Those are not the same thing, right? Because something like does designation from a higher power is not the same thing as like spontaneous or collective organization, right? You can't have you need to be you can't have a slippage between those two, but that's precisely why liberal socialism is so nonsensical. Because to a liberal socialist, obviously there's no difference between a well-designed society and a well-organized society. Um, because they think there needs to be this higher authority that that dictates the ordering of society. It's methodological statism. That he is a Habermas is usually seen as very conservative, given that he is a neo-pragmatist, etc. I don't know, why would pragmatism be conservative or neo-pragmatism? I don't know the difference between pragmatism and neo-pragmatism, but I don't see why it would inherently be conservative, you know? Like Bruno Latour is a pragmatist, arguably, or at least heavily inspired by them, and I wouldn't really call him conservative. So
they're normative individualists in the sense that they think, and this is a technical philosophical point, but it's an important one, that it's the individual's flourishing that is what matters, what's morally important, not the successive abstract entities like the nation or the Volk or the race or
as a as opposed to the individual, which is a very concrete entity, you know? God. Like, this is what I mean, is that you are already like, you can't separate normative and methodological individualism, because in order for you to have a kind of normative individualism, you need to be able to say that the individual is this concrete thing, you know? The individual is as much an abstraction as, the state, the Volk, the nation, etc.
Western civilization, whatever that means these days, right? And that's pretty important, right? Now, some liberal socialists would say that individuals include things like future generations. Others would say it includes non-human animals. And we can have viable debates about this. We have to be a concrete entity moving in the world, or at least a possible one, to kind of count in this calculus.
I'm just making a couple of notes. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting with classical. You mentioned classical liberalism, and you sort of you sort of separated it from the rest, right? And I think maybe when people are saying that socialism and liberalism are incompatible, which people already are in chat, as I would have predicted, I think they're thinking of like classical liberalism, right? And that cuts right through the heart of this methodological collectivist, normative individualist distinction, because classical liberals, I would say, are normatively, methodologically individualist as well, right? So they're basically saying that the individual comes first, the individual in their rights, the individual in their property, right? And that kind of trumps all.
Well, Yui, no. No, that would be normative individualism. That would also be normative individualism. Saying that individual rights and property come first. That's a normative claim. At August? Is somebody is August in chat? I don't see anybody named August in chat.
And the extreme of that is perhaps a Randian sort of, the super John Galt type figure. But for liberal socialists, something like property, and as well as all the other rules of society, are very much a collective endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Yeah, I want to say, as much fun as Ayn Rand is, believing, if you hold that A equals A, you're going to endorse Milton Friedman down the line. Even the classical liberal thinkers that I discuss in the book operate at a
Oh, there's August. The concrete entity centered on individualism is already liberal. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, you can't like the individual is also an abstraction. It doesn't mean that the individual isn't real, but it is an abstraction, you know? Like, it is literally abstracting away so many different things in order to say, what is the core? What is the core individual? What is it that makes and it makes something identical from one moment to the next? Oh shit. I didn't Oh my god, you're so right. Why does it default to top chat? That's so weird. No, you're so right. Yeah, that was really weird. I don't know why OBS was defaulting to top chat. That's strange. Yes.
A bit of a higher level than that, but I'm pretty critical of them. So, just to be really quick on this, my book is a shameless tribute to a Canadian political theorist called C.P. Macpherson. I'm Canadian, right? The book itself is just a plagiarization of his title, The Political Theory of Possessive Individualism. And the whole idea of retrieval is one that I picked up from him. But what Macpherson does is be very critical of what we could call classical liberalism, or to use his term, possessive individualism. These are people like Hobbes, the proto-liberal, Locke, Bentham, etc. And he says that they are fundamentally normative individualists and methodological individualists. You look at Hobbes, who's
Again, I'm skeptical that you can separate these two things. Because in order to be able to talk about individuals as a normative unit, you need to have you need to be able to use you need to be able to recognize them. You need to be able to make them legible to you in some way. And that requires some kind of methodological individualism.
who's a good proto-liberal, and basically says everyone's out for themselves. Everyone's goal in life is to live as long as possible and consume as much stuff as possible. And if we have to kill our mother in order to do that, then by God we will, right?
No, I don't think any liberal, like any neoliberal in all of history has ever believed that. It Hobbes certainly didn't believe that. Locke didn't believe that. Bentham didn't believe that. Like, what's the whatever?
It's just the way of human beings. Locke softens that a little bit, but Bentham kind of comes right back in there with a really hard edge version of this. When we think about his argument for sending the poor to prisons and tattooing them to make sure that we know that they had to get sent to prison in order to work, that kind of stuff. And what McPherson points out is there are a lot of reasons to be extremely critical of this version of liberalism from a left perspective. And I wrote a whole book doing just that earlier on, a critical legal examination of liberalism and liberal rights. Shameless pitch there. But what I wanted to point out following McPherson also is that just
Also, I think this one is a forced guess. I don't think this is a Freud thing. I think that what he's saying is basically like that liberals assume, or that classical liberals assume hedonism, or individual hedonism for each person, which they don't. Like, maybe this is like the kind of thing you think liberals believe when you're like 17. But no liberal throughout in all of history has ever said that you would like that most people would kill their own mother in order to keep consuming or whatever. This is not something that actual liberals believe. And I and it pains me to defend liberals, and their honor like this, but it's kind of gross to me to like try to differentiate yourself from other liberals by doing this kind of like rigmarole where you like slander them. You say like, oh, they want to eat babies and kill everyone, whereas us reasonable liberal socialists, we're nothing like them. Like, come on, man.
because these classical versions of liberalism were limited from this perspective doesn't mean that they all were. Liberalism has evolved and changed over time, and that includes not only anticipating many socialist arguments, but drawing very heavily on socialism in many respects. So I talk about a lot of different figures who moved in a socialist direction or identified as socialists and liberals, but really the tradition, from my perspective at least, matures with John Stuart Mill. Might seem
God damn it. Of course. Just by the way, John Stuart Mill. Oh, sorry, John Stuart Mill. Sorry, different. I was thinking of a different John. But John Stuart Mill was not a socialist. John Stuart Mill was not a socialist. I thought for some reason I thought he said John Rawls. I'm tired if you can't tell, but what's up with analytical Marxism? It's a bunch of liberal egalitarians who liked the moniker of Marxist, but didn't actually read Marx very carefully. So this is like G.A. Cohen, John Romer, a few others that I can't remember. basically, Marxism without the interesting bits. Marxism retrofitted for the Rawlsian liberal egalitarian theory that was popular in analytic philosophy at the time.
A little bit of an odd thing to say, since when I learned about Mill in undergrad, he was always presented to me as the classical liberal par excellence. But as I point out, he identified as a socialist in his biography very clearly. Right,
Yeah.
I'm under the general designation of socialism. Defended a version of it based on workers' co-ops and a kind of welfare state.
My fucking god! So yeah, that's the problem: is that workers' co-ops and a welfare state are not socialism. It's not socialism. All right, it's just not socialism. I don't know what to say about that. But other than it's not socialism. New tab, sure. Let's look at what John Stuart Mill actually said. All right. Yes. So yeah, he was a utilitarian. Yes. Yeah, so he's a market socialist, which is another way of saying a liberal. Yeah. Socialism focused on what he saw as destruction of competition. Yeah, he wants, he literally, yeah. He wants the commodity form, he wants the state, all of these things. He's a liberal. And that's okay. Probably Shakespeare. He probably hangs out with Ben Burgess.
And I really think he breaks from this normative individualist orientation in some important way, or sorry, methodological individualist orientation in some important ways.
Could you go into like more detail on that then?
Thank you, Yuri.
Sure, absolutely. So Mill is without a doubt the arch normative individualist, right? If you think about On Liberty, The Subjection of Women, a lot of his later texts. But he really much appreciated how it is that individual flourishing can only be fully secured in a social setting where things are well organized, especially well organized for the sake of the least well off or the workers of society. So in his autobiography, Mill points out that early on he was without a doubt just a pretty regular classical liberal.
Just to be clear, the recognition that individuals need social structures in order to thrive does not make you a methodological collectivist or whatever Matt wants to call it. You can be a methodological individualist and still believe that individuals need connections to thrive. There's no contradiction there.
But then he credits a lot of different factors, reading the Owenites and the Saint-Simonians, the influence.
Also, I just have to guess. This one is like the least likely to kill me, so let's just go here. So that's one here somewhere, and then one up here. Let's just keep going. Okay, so there's one here, which means that one has to be here. So it could be anywhere from here. Yeah. Damn, that's okay.
His wife, with the evolution of his thought towards socialism. In fact, he's pretty proud of this. He says, in my early days, I had not yet seen further than the kind of parameters of classical liberal political economy. And, the see further thing implies that he thinks socialism is seeing further than classical liberalism. And he comes around to the idea that there are certainly problems with a lot of the versions of socialism out there that he's encountered, including the Saint-Simonians, who he's pretty sympathetic with. But they have the right idea about where to go. He just needs to kind of rework it. So he offers a lot of different arguments for socialism in his mature period. We don't want to run through them all because then I'll lecture here for an hour. But making it real short, he says, look, by and large, capitalists don't contribute all that much to the economy. They're actually kind of an indulgence that society would probably economically be better off without. And that's because workers and firms can pretty much manage things well for themselves and redistribute goods more equally amongst themselves. Now, he still believes in markets and prices and all those things and imagines.
Yeah, so he's not a socialist. Okay, cool.
that a market socialism is going to be competitive in certain ways, and some socialists would be critical of him for that, right? But he says, look, as long as workers own the means of production, we have socialism in any respect.
Really? So if workers all have if they all own shares in a company, if they all own equal shares in the company, does that mean that we have socialism? Have we achieved socialism by having shares distributed amongst the workers? Honestly, I quite like the term liberal socialism if they must call themselves socialism. It's nice they distinguish themselves from communists, Marxists, and uh, uh, ties them to the right sorts of traditions. I mean, the issue though is that people will then think they can go out in public and be like, "Oh, I'm a socialist." Like I maybe. I mean, maybe it is. I've said that maybe we've lost the word socialist, but the reason I'm going to make fun of liberal socialists is because a lot of liberal socialists make pretenses toward, basically agreeing with people like Marx, for example. And that's more or less what I want to push back on, right? I can't stop anybody from calling themselves a socialist, but I can point out where, what they're doing is ultimately still capitalist, like even beyond being not socialist. It's still capitalist. It still reproduces the exact same sorts of problems that that we would want to get rid of. Socialism is when ESOs. Uh, is that employee share ownership? Something like that? Uh, mm, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, employee stock options. There we go. Something I knew it was something like that.
And he also argues that this should be accompanied by a welfare state that will provision education, sanitation, health for all, and that's pretty generous by 19th century standards. And in addition to these kinds of moral economic arguments about efficiency, he also has moral arguments for this that target what we now call a kind of meritocratic argument for capitalism. And this is in his chapters on socialism. So one of the things that he points out there is he hears 1,000 times a day that the primary argument for capitalism is you should keep what you've earned or keep what you've worked for. And Mill says, well, if we actually took that seriously, then the coal miners in England and the guys who clean the streets in England would be bonanza rich, and the capitalists who mostly sit behind a desk would be enormously poor, especially since many of them have inherited their money. That's not the case, and it just goes to show you how everything is kind of backwards and topsy-turvy in a capitalist society, even according to the basic moral dictums that capitalists invoke to defend their system.
But that's not the dictum that they actually invoke. The dictum that they actually invoke is something like, at least in like a mature sense, it's more akin to something like either they make an argument based on efficiency that this is the most efficient way of organizing things, or they make an argument about whether or not each individual transaction was was a fair transaction, whether or not each person along the chain was defrauded in some way, whether or not they were actually taken advantage of. This is like literally the exact argument that Nozick makes. His entire his entire theory of distributive justice is that, anything that results from uh fair acquisition or fair transfer of ownership is a just distribution, like just definitionally. Um, and I think that like that sort of thing, completely sidesteps the issue of of whether or not people working the hardest are actually making the most money, because it's not just about the fruit, like owning the fruits of your labor. you know it's about whether or not somebody had the right to use this property, or whether or not, it was actually they were actually taken advantage of, right? That's why Marx says that capitalism is just in Critique of the Gotha program. He says that it is just. It is a just distribution under the terms of capitalism for the worker to be for the worker to be exploited. But that doesn't mean that it's good, Just because it's just does not mean that it's a desirable situation.
And he says, one of the things about socialism that's going to be good morally is that will uplift people in a way that not only socialists but liberals should appreciate. Because he says, liberals didn't really like this aristocratic system where people had to bow and scrape towards the Lord and say, me Lord and all that stuff. And he says, if you really hold to that as a liberal, you should also be pretty contemptuous of a system where workers have to go into their firm and bow and scrape to the boss and suck up and brown nose and do all that kind of shit.
Yeah, but see, in this case, it was a just acquisition and a just transfer. You know, it's formally free labor. They didn't have to work for that capitalist. They're choosing it. That's what a liberal will say. And what argument do you have against them?
Yeah, it is true. I think it was oh god, it might have been System of a Down who made this point. So to bring the level down maybe a little bit. Well, some of their songs.
I think we're bringing it up at this point.
No,
right?
we're bringing it up actually. Yeah, you're right. No, but they said something like, I think, like, the average American is free until they go to work, and it's like,
Yep.
you were talking about the importance to liberals of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and everything like that. That the workplace is just very clearly somewhere where none of those rights seem to apply anymore. Certainly not in the same way, and that's one of the big contradictions. I mean, I think if a thread I'd like to draw maybe is that liberalism in practice is a lie, right? And the workplace is just one example. And you don't shy away from this, colonialism, right? The poverty in the Industrial Revolution, sexism and racism continuing. Take your pick, right? Liberalism doesn't live up to its ideals. It never has. It's been even worse in the past, but it doesn't still today, right? So I think that's something that.
When you say it's been worse in the past, if you spend any time.
Yeah, so this is what I was saying, that socialism is holding liberalism to its promises. It's fine as a rhetorical device, I guess. I don't know. Does make an enormous deal over very dull cultural issues relating to individuality and culture. Yeah, I've never read Mill, so I can't really comment on that.
Time in the United States and have to deal with the Democrats, you might think, actually, we might have been regressing a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's possible. Yeah, that's possible.
Although you guys have Pierce Armour, so there you go.
I don't think he moves at all. I don't think he regresses or progresses. But no, I mean, your point is taken. I'm kind of thinking maybe if we go like 10 years ago or pre-financial crisis, let's say, when I think everything really started to fall apart. But in any case, it's never lived up to its ideals. But I think there's a mistake here, right? Where somehow the fact that it hasn't lived up to those ideals in the past means that liberal ideals aren't worth expanding and striving for, which I don't.
Yeah, but the problem is that liberal ideals are conditioned on specific things. Liberal ideals of freedom of expression, free speech, these kinds of things, they are specifically reactions to having specific authority structures. They want to maintain these authority structures while also guaranteeing these specific rights for individuals or whatever. That's the issue here. You're presupposing the thing that needs to be overthrown.
Don't think is true at all. I think liberal ideals, like you said, often a socialist will articulate something very close to them when they're arguing for worker democracy or whatever their vision of socialism is.
Yeah, without a doubt. And all the figures I talk about in the book do some version of this, right? Argue that the logical extension of liberal principles into the economy is going to entail a kind of socialism for the reasons that you just mentioned, right? Mill wrote a great deal about the workplace.
Yeah, but that's because liberal, it's just a misunderstanding of what the liberal principles are, the liberal principle of free speech is, and free assembly and whatever, is free speech specifically where there isn't a state, where the state, which is presumed to exist, does not stop you from speaking, or the state which is presupposed to exist does not stop you from assembling. Again, this works rhetorically because the average person is not going to distinguish between those two things, but that's really what liberals mean. Yeah, exactly. Expanding liberal ideals can mean anything.
I was actually quite sensitive to workers' concerns when he was an MP, for that matter. And he said similar things like, look, one of the problems with the old aristocratic system was exactly this kind of slavish attitude that people took towards the aristocracy, and the fact that they weren't capable of managing their own affairs, which Mill thinks is unmanageable.
What do you mean they weren't capable of managing their own affairs? It seems like the aristocracy was capable of managing their own affairs. like the aristocracy lasted, you know? Like obviously it didn't work out well for everybody, but the fact that they were able to last does not mean d- like completely contradicts the idea that they weren't capable of managing their own affairs. They were completely capable. It's just that what their affairs were, uh, like their interests were completely, or not completely, but somewhat orthogonal to the interests of everybody else.
manly and undignified. And one of the reasons he likes what we might call now workplace democracy or workplace management is he thinks it's not only going to be economically more efficient, but morally uplifting, right? It's going to be good for workers to manage their own affairs in their workplace, not just individually because you'll get more out of it, but also socially, right? Because you'll have to manage your workplace, you'll have to interact with others to do this. And he thinks all of this will be really good in terms of elevating the level of politics and association in society. And I broadly think he's right. But Mill was very critical of the actually existing capitalism and liberalism of his day, not just on this issue, but I could also add on the women.
I can't hear the words actually existing socialism without thinking of campists.
Issue. Not quite so forward thinking on imperialism, as I mentioned, and you can be very critical of him for that, but we'll give him points for what he earned points for. Same thing with people like Rawls, Fabio, Move, right?
Of course, you got to bring up Rawls. By the way, Rawls, hugely methodologically individualist. His entire political philosophy is methodological individualism. It is literally individuals acting on their own self-interest, giving rise to a liberal society.
Right? They all kind of hold the mirror up to liberalism and said, if you really believed in all this, then there's no reason why it is that things like freedom of association or freedom of expression should be silenced or irrelevant the minute somebody goes through the workplace door and starts flipping burgers.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also this. I mean, this has been implicit in a lot of what you said, but there's this chronological argument, isn't there, as well, which speaks to what we're saying as liberalism, socialism is the ultimate expression of liberalism's values, because you do track, and your book is sort of quasi chronological.
Liberalism doesn't really have values. That's not true. But liberalism, what makes liberalism so slippery is that you can kind of, it's kind of like the abdication of needing to have values. It supposes itself as being above values. You know, values are things that work themselves out. It's the sublimation of conflict to the political arena. You know, it's like it's very explicit about this. You know, they think that there's a reason that you know, Democrats and Republicans can both exist in the liberal order, because to liberalism, it doesn't matter really what your ideology is, so long as it has the liberal state intact. You know, it's more or less interchangeable. You just need to be able to win the next election.
Or is it completely chronological? But you track
For the most part, we go back and forth a little bit, but
Yeah.
like,
but you can see it with its clearest, well, probably its clearest articulation in John Stuart Mill, right? But you can see it just also develop over time from the early days of liberalism, and it did seem that it was going that way. Now, one person who kind of interrupted this a bit or a lot was Marx, I think, right? So you talk about Marx. Yeah, it's actually quite a short chapter, lengthwise, but it's also
What am I
quite a
missing?
significant chapter, I think. So could you speak to what Marx did to this kind of idea of liberal socialism?
sure. Well, I want to say one of the reasons I included, well, there are two reasons I included that. One is I really like Marx,
There we go.
probably more than you do, actually, even though I don't buy
You do not like Marx.
into things like the labor theory of value either, right?
Uh, Marx also didn't buy the labor theory of value. He didn't buy the labor theory of value. He did not propose that commodities had value in proportion to labor, like metaphysically. Whatever. It's too much. It's too much.
Could I just, on the record, say I actually don't really dislike Marx at all. I just dislike most online Marxists.
Well, most online Marxists don't like other online Marxists, so there you go. You're in good company.
That makes me a Marxist, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you a Marxist more than anyone else. But you know, the other reason also is I just thought, well, if there's a book on socialism and Marx doesn't appear anywhere in a significant way, then it's going to be like watching an Avengers movie and Iron Man doesn't show up or something. People will be like, the fuck did I pay for this for?
Yeah, exactly, Eleanor. The subtitle is Critique of Political Economy, man.
But what I talk about in the chapter is, look, very clearly Marx is not a liberal socialist. I've already seen one or two people try to claim I'm trying to fudge him into that tradition, and I'm very explicit he's not. But what
Okay. You know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. if he's going to make it clear that he's not the forebearer of Marx, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. You know, I wish other liberal socialists were more clear about this, but you know, I'm happy that at least he's clear about this.
What I do point out is that Marx was actually a lot more nuanced in his evaluation of liberalism as a philosophy and political ideology than his reputation sometimes suggests. So Marx
In what sense? Okay.
began his career as a pretty militant liberal in authoritarian Prussia. He was particularly concerned with things like freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, which makes sense when you think that he was a newspaper editor and he was tired of continuously being censored and exiled all across the continent. And even in his later work, he retains a kind of sympathy for many aspects of liberalism. And he also argues that a complete dismissal of liberalism by socialists isn't a particularly Marxist thing to do. So that's a controversial claim. I'll try to explain it, right? The aspects of liberalism that he was always pretty gung-ho about, again, are things like freedom of expression, universal suffrage, freedom of assembly is certainly for workers. And he actually develops quite a Mill-style argument in Capital, where he says all this stuff about the division of powers, free expression, participation in governments is well and good, and liberals are right to apply that to the state. But that all falls silent again the minute the worker crosses the threshold into the factory, where apparently these principles don't apply. And it's very clear that he's
Oh my god. Yeah, he probably should have. Okay. So here's the thing though. Like showing that liberalism doesn't uphold the values it purports to have is not the same thing as saying that, you know, these values are of arch importance. You know, particularly this with respect to the state, he didn't believe in the state. He very explicitly didn't. Like his whole like communism is stateless.
offering a kind of imminent critique here of liberalism, saying the principles are good, but their failure to extend them into the economy and into the workplace is bad, right? And you know, in the critique of the Gotha program, he's actually critical of what we might call utopian socialists for suggesting that what we can do is enact a millenarian break with liberalism, right? That we're just going to year one it the way the Jacobins wanted to at some points, and say, you know, all liberalism is cast aside, and now we're going to move on to a socialist or communist future. Marx is very insistent in critique of the Gotha program that no, actually, any new society that emerges out of liberalism is going to be stamped. That's his terminology with many features of the old system. So bourgeois right and bourgeois recht is not going anywhere. That means many of the right.
Oh no. Are we gonna have to read Critique of the Gotha program? Let me bring up Critique of the Gotha program. Fuck. Is there just like a PDF? I hate that the Marxist Internet Archive does not just have it as a PDF by default. It's really annoying. Um Alright, I should have it. Are you able to see the whole thing? No, you're not. Nope, that's even worse. There we go. So I found bourgeois right. It's right here. Within the cooperative society based on common ownership of the means of production, the producers do not exchange their products. Just as little does the labor employed on the products appear here as the value of these products as a material quality possessed by them, since now, in contrast to capitalist society, individual labor no longer exists in an indirect fashion, but directly as a component part of total labor. By the way, right here, this is him denouncing a labor theory of value. Right here. Literally saying that they don't confront each other, that these products do not appear here as values. Anyway, The phrase proceeds of labor, objectionable also today on the account of its ambiguity, thus loses all meaning. What we have to deal with here is a communist society, not as it has developed on its own foundations, but, on the contrary, just as it emerges from capitalist society, which is thus, in every respect, economically, morally, and intellectually, still stamped with the birthmarks of the old society from whose womb it emerges. Accordingly, the individual producer receives back from society, after the deductions have been made, exactly what he gives to it. What he has given to it, is his individual quantum of labor. For example, the social working day consists of the sum of the individual hours of work. The individual labor time of the individual producer is the part of the social working day contributed by him, his share in it. He receives a certificate from society that he has furnished such and such an amount of labor, after deducting his labor for the common funds. And with this certificate he draws from the social stock of means of consumption as much as the same amount of labor cost. The same amount of labor which he has given to society in one form he receives back in another. So this is the proposal for labor vouchers, I'm guessing. Here, obviously, the same principle prevails as that which regulates the exchange of commodities, as far as this exchange of equal values. Content and form are changed because, under the altered circumstances, no one can give anything except his labor, and because, on the other hand, nothing can pass to the ownership of individuals except individual means of consumption. But as far as the distribution of the latter among the individual producers is concerned, the same principle prevails as in the exchange of commodity equivalents. A given amount of labor in one form is exchanged for an equal amount of labor in another. Hence, equal right here is still in principle. Bourgeois right, although principle and practice are no longer at loggerheads, while the exchange of equivalents in commodity exchange exists only on the average and not in the individual case. So this is what Marx actually says. And then let's hear what Matt says about that again.
Points and say, all liberalism is cast aside, and now we're going to move on to a socialist or communist future. Marx is very insistent in Critique of the Gotha program that no, actually, any new society that emerges out of liberalism is going to be stamped, that's his terminology, with many features of the old system. So bourgeois right and bourgeois recht is not going anywhere. That means many of the rights, institutions, and practices that we see in a liberal order are going to carry on into socialism.
No. So what that specifically means here is the exchange of equivalent amounts of labor through labor vouchers. This would be lower communism. That is specifically what Marx is referring to here with bourgeois right. So, yes, hence equal right here is still in principle. Bourgeois right, although principle and practice are no longer at loggerheads. And specifically what he's talking about is bourgeois equal right, as in the equal right of your exchange of labor. So you put in an amount of labor and you get out from society an amount of labor. That is all he means here. He does not mean, all of the same institutions are going to be in place, or that bourgeois right, as Matt sees it, is not going anywhere. And this is why I find liberal socialists so dangerous, because they misinterpret Marx and other socialist thinkers to their own ends. And, just to be clear, Shakespeare, Merrim, I am getting this right? Like, I'm not misreading this. I'm not misunderstanding what Marx means here. Like, he's very specifically talking about the exchange of equal amounts of labor time. He's not talking about, all of the liberal rights that Matt is really concerned with. Correct? Like, I'm not crazy. Oh, god damn it. Oh, fuck. Where were we? Oh, no. Where were we? I don't remember. I'm gonna have to check. Because I have my search history turned off, so I'm gonna need to check uh, where I was. 2034. Um, yeah.
And he gets a little bit speculative in Critique of the Gothic Program by suggesting it's only going to be in the very long-term future when we've achieved a kind of economic superabundance that we can finally completely do away with all aspects of bourgeois right and move on to a society that inscribes on its banners from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, right? But that's
Yeah, so to be clear though, before the step before that is still communism. Like he's still talking about communism, and the bourgeois right that he is talking about very specifically is the one where equal amounts of labor are exchanged for equal amounts of labor. That's all he's talking about. And it's incredibly disingenuous to say otherwise. Whatever.
that's a pretty long time away, right? So I think when you take all this together, what you recognize is that Marx was a very deep, learned, and nuanced critic of liberalism who appreciated the historical role that it had played as the ideology of the most advanced mode of production that had emerged thus far, while also recognizing that there were a lot of things to criticize liberalism for, not just from a socialist perspective, but even from a liberal perspective, most notably this failure to live up to the principles that liberals claim to espouse.
And I think what's your view on Marxism today, or Marx's view, right, and Marx's kind of anti-liberal socialist tendencies, given the 20th century communism and how that history's played out, how those debates have played out. Do you think is that a reason that you felt like liberal socialism was in need of a revival, or one reason?
You're right, but I would hesitate to call it the lower phase of communism. Well, it doesn't have money, right? Um, or the state, presumably. Like it could be under, I guess it could be under the dictatorship of the proletariat or the transitionary period. But still, the bourgeois right in question is the exchange of equal amounts of labor time. It's not like all of these things that Matt is talking about. Like he's whatever. I'm not even Here's the thing, I'm not even sure that Marx was even really correct about this in the first place. Like to me, I understand the argument that labor vouchers are not capital because you can't accumulate them. That that once they're used, they're lost. Um, it still, on face value, reads like money to me. Um, Even if it would be a better system than what we have, I'm not sure it's even an ideal system. So is Marx even right about this? Arguably not. But yeah.
Yeah, that was a big part of it, right? I mean, morally, I'm broadly speaking committed to liberal socialism. So I just think it's the right, what's called theory of justice or political philosophy to get behind. Although
Oh my god. Political philosophy and its consequences. Remember, in Critique of the Gotha program, Marx is pretty explicit. Capitalism is just. Capitalism is just. But just because it's just does not mean that it's desirable.
I'm very critical of many aspects of it in the book, right? Like I say,
I think the value form people really hate Critique of the Gotha program for basically this reason. I don't really know who the value form people are, or at least I'm drawing a blank on them at the moment.
not a hagiography. I acknowledge that there are problems with the tradition, and I don't offer my own defense of it where I would try to fix those problems. So,
Wait, sorry, what tradition?
so I just think it was a big part of it, right? I mean, morally, I'm broadly speaking committed to liberal socialism. So I just think it's the right, what's called theory of justice or political philosophy to get behind. Although I'm very critical of many aspects of it in the book, right? Like I say, it's not a hagiography. I acknowledge that there are problems with the tradition, and I don't offer my own defense of it where I would try to fix those problems. So stay tuned for that. On the other hand, I also think strategically it is extremely valuable to present ourselves as defenders of liberal values if we're on the left. And the reason is that,
Yeah, so you can do that in the sense that you can say, "Hey, doesn't it suck that your boss gets to dictate everything that you do and that you have no free time?" You know, those kinds of things are good, but you don't need to call yourselves liberal socialists.
Michael Walzer, I think, is broadly right. Sometimes the most powerful critique you can make of someone or of a tradition is an imminent critique, right? Saying not all your principles are wrong, you should adopt different principles, because very few people are going to do that. But rather, if you actually claim to believe in these principles, then you're not living up to them. You need to start extending them into these domains and taking them most seriously within those domains, right? And I think that's what a lot of the liberal socialists do with this argument, saying, why
Yeah, so the issue though, the issue with the imminent critique, and I broadly understand it to like the point here, but you can make liberalism consistent, you know, because the imminent critique works on a rhetorical level, but a true imminent critique is not about saying, oh, liberalism promises this or this ideology promises this but doesn't actually live up to it, because if those things are not actually essential to the ideology, then they will just discard them, as the liberals have done with neoliberalism. You know, neoliberalism has discarded a lot of the things that liberalism claimed to be about because it was never really essential to liberalism in the first place. So the imminent critique needs to actually hit at the core of the system of thought. It can't just, blithely point out hypocrisy. No, I'm aware, Maram. I'm aware. Like, I understand the point that it's not money. It does break the circuit. I'm just making the point that, like, like, if you squint at it, it still looks a little bit like money to me. And it's still kind of it establishes like work as this primary function in society, um where like supposedly somebody needs to like talk it needs to how do I explain this? Like, you're still going to have a division between the working day and your leisure time, right? Because in order for you to be able to quantify how much labor you've put into society, quote unquote, you need to then be able to cordon off specific sections of your time and your life activity as being work versus leisure, right? So we're still having this problem where we're reinforcing a lot of the same issues, but
why is it that we don't extend things like rights of freedom of assembly, democratic participation, expression into the workplace? And why is it we allow aristocratic forms to reintroduce themselves in capital?
well, because again, the reason that we don't allow those things is because they consider it an extension of free expression, specifically the right to do with your property as you wish.
Right? But in terms of the legacy of the command economies, I definitely have no sympathy or nostalgia for the Soviet Union or Maoist China. In fact, I get
Neither do I.
quite frustrated whenever I see people try to defend them. You see online Marxists sometimes say things like, well, think about all the poverty alleviation that took place. And yeah, you have to
By the way, that's a liberal argument. Those people are liberals. Those people are also liberals. Liberal socialists, even.
crack a few eggs in order to make an omelet. My response to that is usually, well, there are plenty of defenders of British imperialism who will apologize for the Great Bengal Famine by saying, yeah, 4 million people died, but think about all the railroads that we built, think about all the institutions that we constructed, think of the wonderful court system that we brought to India. Isn't it all okay, given that we provided these boons to our colonial subjects? And no leftist would ever tolerate that kind of perspective, and rightly so, I want to point out. But if we're not going to tolerate people saying, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, so colonialism is fine, we definitely should not be saying, if you want to make an omelet, you can break a few eggs when it comes to the Soviet Union and poverty alleviation, despite the fact that millions of people starved to death and millions
I agree with that. But again, these people are liberals. So they're on your side. They are also liberal socialists.
more were herded into labor camps, and the same applies in Maoist China. Now, in terms of stop me if I'm going on too long. In terms of Marx's own perspectives, I don't think Marx was a totalitarian or authoritarian thinker at all. I kind of periodized his work in that chapter.
Okay, that's good.
And I suggest that if you read the Communist Manifesto, there are problematic aspects of what's sometimes called democratic centralism in this work, with the argument that a kind of proletariat movement or proletariat party is going to seize the mode of production or the means of production and the state, and then institute a dictatorship of the proletariat. But he pretty clearly moves away from that by the time of his mature work in things like the Civil War in France, where actually he moves very much in the opposite direction, I think correctly, and argues for a hyper-democratic and hyper-participatory kind of social organization, model off of the Paris Commune, where he says there'll be a national assembly, representatives will be almost immediately recallable if they don't implement the will of the people. Everyone is going to be very, very much an active participant in politics at the national level. We're also going to devolve enormous powers to the local level and to local communes, because of course we want people in little towns and little provinces to be self-organizing and participate in their own management as well. Otherwise, what's the point of communism? And if you're
So it's close. I'll mostly give that to him. I will say though that he didn't specifically want to model off the Paris Commune, at least not on my reading. His point was that the organs of the state needed to be smashed and reshaped by the workers themselves. It and I think proposing specifically, model yourselves off the Paris Commune, that would be antithetical to it, because his point was that they would need to respond to the specific circumstances that they find themselves in. Um, but yeah.
you're going to criticize this view, it's not for being too central or too central statist. It might actually be for being almost too hyper participatory, right? It kind of leads to the old observation that socialism might be problematic because it would involve too many endless meetings, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I don't think that Marx, the man, can be held responsible for how it played out. I suppose my issue, and forgive me because I'm just not that well versed in this. Some of these ideas that you raise and bring up in the book is my first time seeing them. But in terms of the way history plays out, right, in Marxism, in
Well, yeah. Even
terms of the sort of dialectical struggle and the way that like
God, please don't, Yui. Please don't use the word dialectical.
a socialist revolution might manifest. Do you think that this led to a kind of firstly, there was this dictatorship of the proletariat idea, but there was also this kind of hands-off idea that well, whatever happens will be the revolution, and whatever happens will be socialism, and that perhaps made people, maybe if not Marx himself, I'm just talking about historically, this made people insufficiently concerned about like violations of liberal principles, for example, in Russia. Do you think that they were just saying, well, whatever after the revolution, whatever we're doing in response to historical circumstances is socialism, and basically they just could have used a sprinkle of liberalism there, they were lacking it?
Yui, man, I like you, but come on, come on. Uh, to be clear, like Marx never believed this and didn't. Whatever. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are enormous debates about this, right? To what extent Marx holds that people have historical agency, or is he a strict mechanistic determinist, and how
To be clear, he is not a mechanistic determinist. People have, like, it's very. Oh my fucking god. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they choose. Or in circumstances that they choose, or something like that, right? Let me find it. Yes. They do not, yeah, men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly encountered, given, and transmitted from the past. Marx does believe in historical agency. He's not a mechanistic determinist. This is like people shouldn't debate this. He's like very clear about this.
that's rippled out across the tradition of Marxism, and we'll be here all day. As briefly as I can, I'm very critical of what J. Cohen calls the obstetric.
Do I want to watch? That's his worst video. I don't really want to watch it. I don't really want to watch it because it's his worst video. Like I want to be kind to Yui because I like his videos, and I don't want to expose people to his worst shit. Oh god damn it, I wasn't paying attention. It's Here's what I'll say. I think that the explanation of how marginalism works is fine. Um, it's very standard economics, but his understanding of what Marx meant uh is bad. His engagement with literature on the tendency for the rate of profit to fall is really bad. You know, like God, like he literally cites Kleiman Andrew Kleiman um what are their faces, Cockshot and Cottrell, um which rightfully so, you know, uh Kleiman owns them epic style. But then in the next section on the tendency for the rate of profit to fall, he doesn't cite Kleiman at all, even though Kleiman is like the person who has spent the most amount of like he is the Marxist economist who has spent the most amount of time writing on the tendency. And like even if you're not going to agree with him at the end, and it's been forever since I read Kleiman, so I don't even know if I would still agree with Kleiman on this. But if you're going to talk about the tendency, you have to engage with Kleiman because it is like his entire project. And it frustrates me that he didn't even fucking engage, despite citing Kleiman and being aware of Kleiman. Hey, Fenico, how are you? But yeah, that's his worst video by a lot. I don't know. I like Yui a lot. Again, I think he's very, because he is an economist by training, he hasn't fully unlearned economics yet. So, he gets one pass. He gets one pass.
View that you still sometimes see floating around in online Marxism. And the obstetric view holds that really the only job that socialists have.
Listen, Yui is a fan of Karl Polanyi, okay? And that automatically elevates him in my estimation. He's also a James C. Scott fan, and that elevates him in my estimation as well. And in general, I think that Yui is an honest actor. I think that what he is doing is honest, and that he is doing what he thinks is right, and that he is, actually trying his best to engage with the literature and with critiques. Like I've sent him several DMs on things that I've just because, and he's gotten back to me and talked to me and humored what I've said plenty of times. Um, and you know, if he didn't care at all, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't bother to engage with viewers like that. You know, do you ever hear about Philosophy Tube responding to DMs criticizing her work? No, but Yui does, and I think that I can appreciate. I can appreciate that.
Is to give birth or to facilitate the birth of a new society that's coming one way or another, right?
In a way, Yui is kind of like a socialism done left in that, um, yeah, yeah. And again, like you can't if you're going to engage with the tendency for the rate of profit to fall, you have to engage with Kleiman because Kleiman has made it a huge part of his work. You can't just engage with like a couple different papers that like try to quantify it. You need to look at what Kleiman does.
This is the kind of mechanistic, deterministic form that Marxism very often
Sorry,
took
I,
through the
I
20th
completely
century.
zoned out of the last few things he said.
Sprinkle of liberalism there. They were lacking it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are enormous debates about this, right? To what extent Marx holds that people have historical agency, or is he a strict mechanistic determinist, and how that's rippled out across the tradition of Marxism. And we'll be here all day. As briefly as I can, I'm very critical of what J. Cohen calls the obstetric view that you still sometimes see floating around in
There we go. G.A. Cohen. I knew it was going to come out.
online Marxism. And the obstetric view holds that really the only job that socialists have is to give birth or to facilitate the birth of a new society that's coming one way or another, right? This is the kind of mechanistic, deterministic form that Marxism very often took through the 20th century, and you find it in a lot of the more orthodox streams. And what's interesting about them is they kind of, again, held that socialism and communism are coming no matter what you want, because the science of history has shown that is coming. Yeah, maybe you have a little bit of agency to make it come a little bit quicker, and capitalists have a little bit of agency to make it come a little bit slower, but the end result is never in question. Well, Cohen points out, certainly by the 1990s, that this obstetric view of socialism and its imminent arrival is just completely implausible, right? Nobody could honestly say they believed in it anymore and be taken seriously. And so I think that Cohen is right that given that, what we need to do is make moral and economic arguments for that reason for the superiority of socialism relative to its rivals. And there, I think it's very clear.
I mean, no. Like, to be clear, that is not the conclusion that you have to draw from this. That you need to, like, make the arguments or whatever. Because the arguments are waiting to be made amongst the people. You know, you need to be able, like, we're not people from on high, who are coming to the unwashed masses to tell them about, the revolutionary truth. So, it's not about making the argument necessarily. You need to meet people where they are.
Clear that we would want to incorporate liberal principles like freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, etc., into any socialism that was worthy of love and fidelity. Now, the actual arguments for that and how to make that combination, it's pretty tricky, and I'm still working on it myself, right? But I don't see anything incompatible with between saying workers should own the means of production and we should be committed to things like basic liberal rights. If anything, again, a lot of the figures in the book that I talk about say we should extend liberal rights into the workplace because they belong there if they belong anywhere.
But again, the workplace is a liberal right. Like, the workplace is a product of liberal right, namely the right of private property.
I mean, one of the motivations I had for my channel, and I'm glad for this idea of liberal socialism because I do think it defines me quite well. But I think there
Oh, Yui. Oh, Yui.
was this reluctance.
Later editions in the book, I'm going to hold you to that, by the way, and I'll be like, I'm learning economics as I am a liberal socialist.
I am a liberal socialist, yeah. And then 20 years later, I'll say I am not a liberal socialist to confuse
Yeah.
everyone. But like, I was kind of frustrated with this tendency, and it's not just Marxists, and arguably it's actually more anarchists that do this, where
Yeah.
they are just like, oh, I don't know what anarchism would look like. They're like, oh, we really need anarchism. We got to dismantle capitalism. We got to dismantle the state, etc. Then you ask them, and they're like, well, I don't know. Like, it's just going to happen. It's just going to be anarchism. It's like, and I'm like, okay, I don't need you
To be clear, anarchists do propose some things. But, okay, man, Yui, you are a fan of seeing like a state. So surely you understand, if you are a fan of seeing like a state, that you understand the perils of proposing from on high how we think society should be structured in advance, right? Surely you should understand this.
to produce a like 120-page document, but like sometimes it's like there's this
I'm actually going to DM him about this afterward.
real like almost deliberate choice not to envisage anything concrete, and I think that's something that I've done on my channel economically. I think from a political perspective that's something that this book really helps to do, right? It's like, what do we actually want to see? And Marx did have this quote about cookshop recipes of the future or whatever, but like I think that might have prevented us as leftists from having any ideas, and I think people notice that when they're like, well, what do you actually want? And you're like, oh, smash capitalism, and it's like, with what? Turn it into what? I've always found that quite frustrating.
And I also find it frustrating, like, to be clear. I'm very much the kind of I'm like the models person. I like having models. I like being able to tell people what I want specifically to happen. But I also think that, like, it's not just about me, I guess. It's not just about me and what I want. There are other people here too. And I'm happy to propose like toy examples or potential new social arrangements. But I don't think that they can be held. But the issue is that once you do that, you get into this fight over, oh well, what about this problem and what about this problem, and then you get bogged down in this very intractable debate with people who are not going to concede to you on anything. They're not going to ever concede to you that these problems can be solved. They will find one problem and say it's an unsolvable problem. And that'll be it. That'll be the end of your engagement. So, at that point, you just need to say, well, I don't know exactly what the future is going to look like. But you can talk about how, like, as a methodological approach, how you want to build these future institutions. And generally, anarchists, when they talk about this sort of thing, talk about, like, independent self-organization. And necessarily, when you do these independent self-organizations, they're going to be imperfect. You know, when these things come about, they will be imperfect the first time, and the second time, and the third time. But there's always going to be the anarchist in the corner who's more anarchist than thou, who tells you that actually you haven't perfectly excised all authority. But you know that person is necessary. You know, that person is necessary. It's necessary that that person exists so that we continue improving. All right. Whatever.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look, I fucking love punk music also, right? And I'm
Yeah.
plenty happy to say that I want to smash a lot of shit a lot of the time, right? And some days I think that's all that you really need, right? But I think that Vivek Chibber, who's a very good Marxist analyst, really
Uh, oh, Vivek. I think Vivek is the person who did like that other article that I was reading, like a while ago, like the like the I don't remember what it was called. It's like it was about materialism and like what it means. Jacobin. Yeah, the materialism is essential for socialist politics. Yep. This guy is a hack. This guy doesn't understand Marxism or materialism. I've recently been trying to think about how to explain Marxist materialism because I'm gonna make a video about it. I'm gonna make a video explaining what Marxist materialism actually means. You are too good at Minesweeper. I don't even know how to. Fenico, it's actually not that difficult. Minesweeper is a pretty easy game, all things considered. Um, it's very procedural. Also this is a forced guess, I believe, especially here. Yeah, this is obviously a forced guess. So yeah, whatever. Unfortunate.
rightly points out that the obstetric view that I just pointed out was never going to be all that appealing to a lot of the working class because it was predicated on the idea that the working class or any other marginalized people really did have nothing to lose but their chains. And consequently, why would you not do a revolution and bring about the end of capitalism? And whichever
To
point
be clear, you have nothing to lose but your chains. Like this was not this was part of the Communist Manifesto. It's aspirational. You know, it's part of a piece of propaganda.
points out is actually like, the working class has quite a lot to lose if there's not something that's guaranteed to be better in its future. You could be fired, right? And if you think it's difficult to be fired if you have a middle class job, boy, if you're earning minimum wage, losing that can be extremely, extremely damaging. Right? You know what they say: the only thing worse than being exploited by capital is not being exploited by capital. You can lose the respect of your friends if you endorse left-wing policies. You can see your entire workforce, which probably includes members of your family, laid off or gotten rid of if you decide to unionize. So socialists need to recognize that if you're going to convince people who are already in a difficult position to risk the little bit they have for a better future, then you better have a pretty persuasive vision of what's going to replace it and how it's going to make their lives better. I think we owe that to the people that we are trying to help, and I think that not providing that for them.
Yeah, so but that's the thing, is that I don't think it helps to have like this big overarching plan. You know? This is why self-organization is favored by anarchists. Like it's very specifically because of this. It's because like when you try to talk to people about like big grand visions of the future, they often don't understand what the fuck you're talking about. You know? And a lot of the times they don't even care. You know? They often just care about themselves specifically. And that's not like, you know, that's not an indictment of them by any means. But, you know, if you're going to you can't, trying to sell them on like visions of the future, it's going to be a hard sell no matter what. So that's why the local self-organization approach is often favored. It's a version on Steam with variants, but mainly just has a far better procedural generation, so there's no guessing. So, Eleanor, funny you should mention this. I actually want there to be guessing. I prefer it unless there's going to be designed puzzles in Minesweeper. So specifically Temetse. I don't know if you've heard of Temetse, but it's a very good Minesweeper game um, on Steam. And all of the puzzles are designed. Um, so there's such that there is no guessing, but also every puzzle is its own unique thing. I like that sort of thing. I do not like procedural Minesweeper where there's no guessing. For a couple of reasons. For one, I think that it's an interesting challenge in its own right to be able to guess uh which has the better outcome, like probabilistically, because that's not always that's sometimes going to be a different question that flexes a different kind of intellectual muscle than, what is the right move. That's one thing. The other reason is because I think Minesweeper is more artistically interesting when it's random. Um, you know, and I think to some extent this has been overdone because like it can be overdone rather. I believe in some very early versions of Minesweeper, you could die on the first button press. Like you were guaranteed, like there was no guarantee that even your first opening was going to be safe, which is crazy, right? But I think I think the randomness makes it a more artistically interesting game because I think it plays on that frustration a little bit. Uh it makes it gives it a lot more texture, I think. Because there's something exhilarating about not knowing if there is actually a solution or not. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And just saying we're going to smash capitalism and see what happens is a bit disrespectful to people who are already going through an awful lot and deserve to have people who are a little bit more farsighted.
Oh, fuck you, man. Fuck you.
Trying their best to make the world a better place.
Absolutely. Coming back to the methodological collectivism and normative individualism, it's like this is we want to create the conditions where individuals can flourish because there's a logic to individualism, isn't there? Because all of us
Yep.
only really experience the world as the individual we are, and that's all we'll ever experience, right? And really,
Is it
we are kind of responsible for our own actions in a sense, and the buck kind of stops with each of us. However, there is an entire society around us, and the way that it's constructed affects everything we do. And so that's why I really like this idea. But I think I haven't got a ready-made slogan or platform, but I just think that does point the way to something that's actually quite empowering for people, where it's like, okay, we're going to reconfigure society in a way that allows you to flourish as an individual, and it's not normatively collectivist. It's not a kind of you're going to be assimilated into the whole type thing.
Yeah, again, Marx dissolves this distinction between collectivism and individualism.
Right, and just do ask only what you can do for your country type thing, which I don't think people really like. Certainly not in the West. But it's
Is it something that people dislike? I feel like you can frame it such that people actually do like it. But again, I wouldn't, because Marx doesn't require you to. But I think that people are wrong when they say that a lot of people in the West, or at least in the United States, actually care that much about individual freedom. Like they use it as a pretense, but they often don't actually care. They're happy to give up other freedoms uh in exchange for like oppressing black people or deporting immigrants. you know they're happy to give up those freedoms when they want to. They're happy to have a nanny state when it does things that they like. I don't think that there is like, I don't think that people inherently yearn for freedom even in the West. Like you have to play this very specific muscles.
just it does also accommodate the social part of things, which is undeniable and which is one of the main limits of classical liberalism. So I think even if we haven't fully fleshed it out here, it does point a way forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm more than Marxist enough to say that a lot of the kind of abstract collective entities for which we're asked to die are just that. They're abstract entities that are reifications, and they don't really have that much of a purchase on our moral fidelity. I agree with Benedict Anderson in Imagined Communities, where he says the thing about nationalism is it asks us to feel great big feelings about what are ultimately very small ideas, which I think is actually a pretty great characterization of the contemporary far right.
Never read Imagine communities.
Great big feelings for very, very, very small ideas, and for that matter, also very, very small people, right? But at the same time, right, it's important to recognize that we are social animals. And I sometimes articulate this to my students with a simple example that I took from Up in the Air, actually, the George Clooney movie, which is honestly not that bad. He sits there and is like, look, ask yourself what happy memory you've had. Think about whatever it is. Was someone else with you there at the time? Probably, right? A lot of people will say their wedding. Some people will say the birth of their child, where their family was around. Other people will say it's at a football game, American football or European football, whatever it happens to be, when their team scored a goal. But there was probably someone else with you. And honestly, if the happiest memory you have is I got real stoned and ate a pint of Häagen-Dazs while I was playing, on my PlayStation 5, I've done that. It's pretty great. But it'd be kind of sad if I said that was the happiest memory I've had, because I feel that was kind of lonely, right? So I think that this.
And that's just a projection onto you. Like, the okay, this is a completely different thing, but like the uh the idolization and the lionization of being social is frustrating to me for a lot of reasons, because it's often used as a pretense um to correct, quote unquote, um neurodivergent people who prefer to be alone, um or who want to be alone a lot of the time, you know? It's often used as a cudgel against them to say that they're, like, doing it wrong, so, I don't know. I don't think that if somebody's memory is best memory is one where they're alone, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with them. It's not like I don't think it means that they had a sad life necessarily, but whatever. Maybe I'm just nitpicking.
Methodological, collectivist, and normative individualist orientation captures a lot of the best of both worlds. And again, I want to point out it's not my idea. Shout out to Tony Smith if he's listening. Thanks a lot for that. Good book.
Could I just say that somebody, thanks for leaving a super chat, Mobius strip, but they were requesting an audiobook. Is that on the cards?
I don't know. I mean, look, the book is sold well, better than I thought, actually. And I'm happy about that. So Rutledge just got in touch with me about maybe making a public access. We'll see. I mean, my voice is kind of nasally and bad. Maybe I'll see if Morgan Freeman's available and signs off on liberal socialism. But I'll look. How about this? I'll ask them today and I'll see what they say.
Okay.
Morgan Freeman wouldn't. Morgan Freeman is conservative, I believe.
Well, thank you. Well, that's a very good answer. Yeah. So there's some. We've spoken about some of the big hitters. I also want to mention that I did spot a very snarky Steven Pinker reference in the early part of the book, where you said it was basically accusing him of being kind of teleological. Was it not?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things that I point out. I mean, look, I don't have a lot of patience for Marxist versions of teleology. But the thing is that liberals have
I mean, neither do I.
plenty of teleological thinkers
Yep.
that continue down to the present day. Think about people like Francis Fukuyama. But probably the crudest and most annoying, at least to me, is Steven Pinker with this idea that, look, the future is always going to get better.
A lot of the liberal socialists are also teleological thinkers, by the way.
All we need to do is have more neoliberal capitalism and more people like Bill Clinton in charge. And I just don't understand why it is that people seem so dissatisfied with their lot when I'm looking at the figures here from my perch in Harvard, and things just seem to be getting better and better for people like me, right? So I don't know. I mean, somebody once said to me, they're like, "You seem like a pretty nice guy, pretty normal." I'm like, "Thanks," but I was like, "I can definitely be a little bitch when I try, right?" I mean, just go read some of my reviews in Jacobin of right-wing thinkers, right? I mean, if you think I'm mean to Steven Pinker, just see how I feel about James Lindsay, or Gad Saad. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I'd be pretty insulted that I'd have to read a book by James Lindsay in the first place. So yeah, I can't imagine what would come out. But no, I mean,
Believe me, if you're one of his readers, you feel a little bit insulted because you're like, "Man, this guy thinks I'm fucking stupid, doesn't he?"
yes, and most of his readers will, in fact, be stupid. It's funny, the teleology thing. I mean, with Pinker, it made me realize something, that even you're really, I mean, it's really short and snarky, this reference, but I thought about it quite a lot, probably more than any other reference in the book. But it did make me realize that his vision of progress is one where it just happens because of some pre-specified Enlightenment principles and some rambling about entropy that I didn't really think was necessary. But he doesn't actually have a vision of who creates progress, right?
Yeah.
And this is more than just hating on Steven Pinker, because I do think it's actually quite a good line that you could draw.
Okay, I'm getting bored by that. Fuck Steven Pinker. I also hate him. You know what? I'm gonna send Yui a DM. Sorry, I'm taking a second to write a DM. I'm still here, by the way. I'm still just typing out. Anyway, that's fair. Anyway, I hope that was some interesting typing there. You know what? Let's look at the ABA conference finally. I hate myself just enough that I feel like I can do this now. Um, that's not the one. Here it is. All right. This is probably going to kill me. But let's see. Let's see.
Bill is an avid baseball fan. He's a Cubs fan, so we'll forgive him for that. But he knows that he wasn't the last pitcher of the day, and really it's me who's the closer of today. No, I'm the closer, John.
For context, there's actually a lot of context to be had here. So Justin Leaf is somebody who supports rather ABA, which is applied behavior analysis. Essentially what applied behavioral analysis is conversion therapy for autism. But it has a lot of institutional force behind it, and Justin Leaf is one of the most avid defenders of it. He's published so many defense pieces on ABA over the years. And he's the son of somebody who also works in the profession. So he is like super involved with it and has a vested interest in making it look good.
John, I'm the closer. I'm the last one. There's no extra innings. And there's no extra innings because this is kind of just like mop-up work for me, because the presenters were so excellent today that I don't have to do anything to, get this crowd up. It's just been such a great day. When I was walking down the halls, people said, how do you feel it's going? How are you feeling right now? And I had to think about that because it's a lot of work to put on a conference and a lot of stress. And I didn't know how I felt, but then I realized exactly how I feel at this moment. And this is me, Ted Lasso, so happy with just everything that occurred today.
Oh my God. Oh, good Lord. Oh, good Lord. Oh, no.
And part of my happiness is when I was a young behavior analyst in the University of Kansas, rolling my grandfather down the streets of Massachusetts Avenue, I have never dreamt that I'd be presenting in a conference like this. I never dreamt that I'd be presenting with so many brilliant parents of individuals with autism.
Notably, not actual autistic people, but parents of autistic people.
Autistic individuals themselves.
Oh, there we go. Fair enough.
Pat Fryman, who also went to the University of Kansas, was like a god to us. You would see his name in the halls, and you looked up to him. Never would I have thought I would share the stage with Pat Fryman. Yet alone Bill Heward, whose doorstop of a book was required reading by Steve Fawcett. And we read it every single day for a semester, and would talk about it. Wouldn't even have the courage back then to talk to Bill, yet alone be presenting with him. I have never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be presenting with the CEO of Autism Speaks.
Yeah. Because autistic people famously are very cool with Autism Speaks.
Or the CEO of Uber, and sharing a
Wow, the CEO of Uber. Great company you've got here. Oh,
stage with them. I would never thought in an ABA conference we'd be seeing the CEO of Uber presenting. And then, even if I was dreaming, I would never thought that I would be presenting in the same conference that I drive home last night, Van Jones, who I didn't know, by the way. I didn't have the 5 years ahead of the curve like he does that know he would be a big deal. But would have never thought that Van Jones would be at a conference. Or
God, this is so fucking cringe. This is so cringe. I can't even... Like, holy shit, man. Stop fanboying. Get to the fucking point.
Lord Farquhar. Never. So I'm pretty happy right now because for me, it's pretty cool. And I hope it's pretty cool for you as audience members.
It probably won't. I don't actually know. I don't know how RFK feels about something like ABA. The thing is that the federal government has sought to deny insurance coverage for ABA, because it's expensive. So, It's entirely possible that they would drop it on those grounds, but who knows?
But more than pretty cool, I hope that today has left you inspired. Inspired for improving the standards.
Dude, oh my god. This is so, this is so cringe. Like, I don't even have another word to describe this.
In the field. Inspired for helping children, adolescents.
Like, wow, you looked up cool, cool with a cool font and posted it onto your slide, and then you look up inspired and went to the images. Like, holy shit, man, you don't need a fucking slide for all of this shit.
And adults diagnosed with autism, inspired for helping their families. That's why.
Also, notice how he says adults diagnosed with autism and not autistic people, because he thinks that autism is a disease, and also that you can recover from autism, by the way. His dad thinks that you can cure autism with ABA, by the way. Should I bring that up? I can bring that up. Let me bring that up real quick. Yeah. So this is an interesting conference paper. Let me do this real quick. Zotero. Turn off Minesweeper. Can I zoom in? There we go. So this is by his dad. His dad wrote this. Technically not him, Ronald Leaf, but he's co-authored with his dad a lot. So, one thing. We stopped using physical punishment, not because it was ineffective. It was incredibly effective. We stopped it because it was not politically correct. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Yes. So, look at this. Look at this. Yeah. Where is it? And there are still debates about recovery, for God's sakes. I do not get it. There is research, independent research, showing recovery does happen. From autism, by the way, is what he means. Maybe recovery is not a good term, and yes, we need to be careful about promoting recovery as a selling point for ABA, but the reality is that a significant subset of children can achieve recovery. Maybe we should use a different term than recovery, but if a child's IQ is in the normal range, if they are in general education and they do not present with autism, call it what you want, but it is still a very significant outcome. So, again, you know, just to give you like a flavoring of like what these people actually believe. Just really horrifying shit here.
Why we do this conference is to help you guys be inspired. And when I'm thinking of what to present, what comes to mind is progressive ABA. That's how I want to end this conference, because
Yes. By the way, this is something this is a paper he wrote. Applied behavior analysis is a science and therefore progressive. Great.
the work that my colleagues have done for 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years is all about progressive ABA. Now, there's a paper out there, Applied
He calls it progressive ABA. It's literally just ABA.
Behavior Analysis is Science, and therefore
What his dad does that he says can achieve recovery, that's progressive ABA as well.
progressive. I want to say that the word progressive is not a political stand for anyone that doesn't want to read it because it has the word progressive in it. I've not had to include that in my talks because people come up to me, say they don't want to hear anything about progressivism. It's not about that. It's about our science and how we can always improve our science. I encourage you to read this paper if you haven't already. And what I'm going to be talking today, briefly, because I only have very little time, I want to give as much time to the other presenters as possible, is the pillars of progressive ABA. What is so fundamentally important in the work that we do? I should go back and say, when you hear the word progressive ABA, some of you might think of the word quality. And that's really what it was. When we wrote this paper, I don't remember the original title, but it was something to the effect of quality. And the editor said you can't put that.
To be clear, quality ABA does not meaningfully differ from low quality ABA. It's just about the tracking metrics. The methods are exactly the same.
In the journal because you're saying that people are not doing quality by doing it. And I said, well, I'm really trying to show what quality is, and if people aren't doing it, that's a problem. So we came up with the word progressive. Now, I'm going to go over these pillars. As I said, I'm a product of my environment, and my environment was the University of Kansas. And even more than Pat Fryman at the University of Kansas, Mont Wolf was the god for us. Mont Wolf, my mentors, Jim Sherman, Jan Sheldon, revered Mont. And every single day for 5 years, we heard stories about Mont. And I have to say, being removed from Kansas, I miss these stories immensely. I miss hearing about it. If someone was to come to me and say, what's your favorite article, Justin? It's no brainer. It's this article. This article in 1978 talked about how we as behavior analysts can find our heart, how we must
Social validity, the case for subjective measurement, or how applied behavior analysis is finding its heart.
include measures of social validity on the procedures, on the results. We talked about this, or Mont talked about this. This is nothing new. And today,
Let's look this paper up. Let's look this paper up. Is there a new window? Yeah, sure. Whatever. Because I have a feeling what he means by social validity is like making sure that the autistic kid is normal. All right. Let's go Sci-Hub. Nope. Not on Sci-Hub, really? Am I looking at the wrong Sci-Hub? What? Is this article really not here? Okay, give me a second. Oh. This is really weird that I can't find this. Social validity. The case for subjective measurements. So NIH has it. PDF. There we go. Apparently I just missed it. Let me skim through this real quick. Oh, yeah. Oh, baby. Alrighty. Alrighty. This is gonna be interesting. Where are you, Minesweeper? Alright. Scroll down to here, alright? If our objective was... So, the message we seemed to be getting was that social importance was a subjective value judgment that only society was qualified to make. If our objective was, as described in JABA, which is the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, to do something of social importance, then we need to develop better systems and measures for asking society whether we were accomplishing this objective. The suggestion seemed to be that society would need to validate our work on at least 3 levels. 1. The social significance of the goals. Are the specific behavioral goals really what society wants? 2. The social appropriateness of procedures. Do the ends justify the means? That is, do the participants, caregivers, and other consumers Notice how they say consumers because it's all a product to them. Consider the treatment procedure acceptable. 3. The social importance of the effects. Are the consumers satisfied with the results? All the results, including any unpredictable ones. This one is never fulfilled, by the way. This thing is never fulfilled. They do not measure this. They do not measure if people are satisfied, if the actual people are satisfied with the results. And consumers, well, rather, they don't measure if the autistic children are satisfied with the results. They measure if the parents are satisfied with the results. Yes. Sorry, I'm just skimming this. Yeah. So let's not mince words here. Like, what they really mean by social validity is, do the parents like what we're doing?
Today, I'm glad that people are rediscovering and talking about the importance of social validity. It makes me really happy to see on social media people are talking about social validity and that we have to strive to do better on social validity goals. Now, in quality ABA programs, in progressive ABA programs, it is my contention that this has been going on for years. I'm going to show you a video of one of my first clients years ago. He's being interviewed by his sister, who's going to Cal State Long Beach. It's a very short clip, and he's just talking about his program.
Every once in a while I go and observe. So he used to have helpers.
Okay, I'm gonna skip this because I don't think it's appropriate for, you know, I don't think that I don't know if these people actually consented to their shit being used this way. Certainly I don't think he did.
But to me, it's not a clear-cut path. There's kind of a fork in the road. Because sometimes, just sometimes, validity is important time of KU. So you can hear there that he chooses what to work on. And that choice was important. And this was before my time at KU, so pre-2005, where we were incorporating this as part of our programming, as part of the behavioral.
To be clear, when he says choosing what to work on, he means within the bounds of what the behavioral analyst will pick. So you get a choice in the same way that, like, you know, you get to choose, like the kid gets to choose whether to have broccoli or asparagus, you know? It's not really a choice.
Intervention. Social validity is important. It is important. It's a pillar to include individuals with autism and their families in goal development and our outcomes. But to me, it's not a clear-cut path.
So then why aren't individuals with autism, why aren't autists included? Because the research doesn't include them.
There's kind of a fork in the road. Because sometimes, just sometimes, families and children might not be making the best decisions for themselves. And it's our job as helping professionals to ensure that their quality of life is going to improve. Now, I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to come.
To be clear, they don't know if quality of life improves for these people. They don't study it. They don't study the quality of life of autistic people. They don't study it. None of these people study it.
Back to what I mean here.
What's with the kid wearing a cummerbund?
I let him wear whatever he wants to wear.
Those boots are the best. Who's are they?
I know, right? I think they're Kevin's. I'll have a hot dog with a mustard and Kanish. Frankenstein, what do you want?
30 packets of ketchup.
All right, 30 packets of ketchup. Ow, nice cut, pal. Frankenstein, do that thing I taught you the other day. That's cool. 20 minutes to learn that, man. He's quick, he's smart, and he loves ketchup. Yeah, he does. This is like a whole new school of child raising I'm doing. You give the kid options instead of orders. You know, let him make the right decision.
You're a pioneer.
Yeah. So this is what ABA people think letting autistic people decide things for themselves will lead to.
This was a joke. This movie is comedy. And yet today, I think people are taking this seriously. I fully believe, and my colleagues fully believe in offering choice. But if children are choosing, and they're children, I want to remind you, children are choosing to play Minecraft instead of going to school, we're not going to say, okay, Alex, you get to play Minecraft all day, you don't have to go learn. If children say, you know what?
Why don't you try to meet them where they're at? Because obviously a lot of children would rather play Minecraft than go to school, and obviously they should probably go to school. But, you know, do you not think that maybe, like, an autistic child has reason not to want to go to school? That, you know, maybe it's an overstimulating environment for them? That maybe they're being made fun of by their peers? Like, why is it that the only thing that you are allowing them to do is conform?
I want to poop on the floor. You as a parent clean it up. That should not happen. And you think it's a joke.
This is always the example they use. Oh, well, autistic people, if we don't put them through conversion therapy, then they'll just poop on the floor. It's always the example that they use.
Some of you are laughing, except my colleagues and I, some of us sitting here, have heard that being recommended by behavior analysts on podcasts. I am fully for choice. I am fully for including families in that process. But at the end of the day, as a helping professional, we have to do what is right, not what is easy or what is popular. We have to serve our clients, the individuals we get the privilege of serving, and helping them along their journey. To me, this is the first pillar.
It's always clients, by the way. Always clients, consumers. It's very, very corporatized.
The second one is clinical judgment. Clinical judgment. This is, to me, one of the biggest hallmarks of a progressive approach. Clinical judgment is also not a new concept. In 1978, Ron and others wrote an unpublished handbook of behavior.
Ron being his dad, by the way.
Behavior modification, which was used as part of the UCLA Young Autism Project. So this is part of the handbook that they used. And
so the UCLA Young Autism Project, there was also, alongside of that, the UCLA Feminine Boys Project, which was gay conversion therapy, by the way.
In the very first page of this handbook, the word flexibility was said 7 times. 7 times. This is 1978. They were talking.
What does this say? Of the most important goals in teaching is to be flexible. The ability to move on is not easily accomplished, yet it is essential to the learning process. Without flexibility, goals and expectations may be inappropriate and can only serve to hinder the child's successful progress if they are not changed. I can't read this. This is too small.
About being flexible. Now, somewhere around down the road, we stopped listening to that message. I was in Missouri ABA once, and Todd Streff, if you're still in the room, you can confirm it. Todd asked me, because he was the president there, what order do you want to speak? I always like speaking last. I like getting the last word, essentially. And we were there, and someone, I don't know who they were, said in ABA, we should never use the word clinical judgment or flexibility. I changed my entire talk. My entire talk was different. And after my talk, and after drinking copious amounts of wine with Todd, I started thinking, why? Why are we afraid of clinical judgment? Why do we like adhering to protocols so much? Why do we hear, let's stop using clinical judgment? And to me, the reason is because we don't have a good operational definition. We as behavior analysts geek out on operational definitions. We love it. We spend hours upon hours on an operational definition. So my colleagues and I have come up with some factors when I talk about clinical judgment. I want to be clear. Clinical judgment is not a gut feeling. It's not like I have a gut feeling and I'm going to do something about it. It is based on child and environmental factors. Constant, in-the-moment analysis by our therapist. And these are just some of the factors. This is usually an hour talk or 3-hour talk, so I can't go over each of them. But I'm going to give you some of them. One thing we look at always is the function of behavior. And I'm all for FBAs, and FBAs are great and cool and everything, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in the moment. Why is a behavior occurring?
FBA is functional behavior analysis, by the way.
That the therapist knows in the moment is assessing what is that function. Because if you do an FBA a week ago, 6 weeks ago, 6 minutes ago, the function of the behavior might have changed. So our staff who are implementing progressive ABA must be looking at the function. The other part I want to talk about is
by the way, like when they talk about the function of a behavior, they're specifically referring to like the behavioral function of it. So what is it, like, is it self-reinforcing? Is it, what other behaviors is it begetting? They're not really talking about, like, most other functions.
Responsiveness. How receptive are they to learning? Now, I've hinted throughout the day, I'm obsessed with baseball. And I've got my older son obsessed with baseball, too. I think I've done a pretty good job. My stepmom said I did a good job conditioning him. My youngest one, not so much.
Jesus Christ.
Give me a year, let's see what happens.
Oh my God, dude. Oh my God. You don't need to live vicariously through your children.
And he is what we call a baseball Zimby, is what we're talking about, is the code words we use. Every day he goes home, he hits off a tee, or we do heavy balls or slow pitches, he's working on it. But some days I pick him up, and I just know he looks tired, he looks beat. It was a rough day at school, he had too much handball, is usually the reason, and he's dirty and legs cut and bleeding. He's just not in the mood to get drills at the end of the day. Baseball's still important. I have to switch my strategy from tossing him slow pitches to guess what? We're just gonna go watch Mike Trout do great and lose some games. That's what we
Seriously, dude? Oh my God. Dude. What the fuck? What the fuck, man? Is anybody still watching this? I'm not crazy, right? This is fucking weird, right?
we have to switch to. And it's still doing that lesson. It's the same when you do intervention. You sometimes see the learner, and sometimes they're just not receptive to learning, and we have to adjust that kind of learning. Of course, it's data-driven. And the last one...
By the way, when they say adjust, they mean put them in timeout.
I want to talk about really quickly is operant versus emotional, what I call emotional respondents, which is really what Watson was talking about years ago. Tomorrow, I leave on a much-needed couple days off. My dad and my stepmom graciously are going to take my kids. And my kids are going to be crying, or my youngest one's going to be crying, is my guess, not my oldest. And it's not because they don't want it, they're trying to escape their grandparents' house. They love going there. And it's not because they're trying to get attention from us, or that it's self-soothing to cry. It's because they're just sad. They're sad that mom and dad are leaving them, or they're sad that we're not taking them on the trip. And that's the kind of emotional respondents. We have to be looking at behavior in different ways. So these are just some of the factors of clinical judgment. The other is flexible procedures. When you do ABA and you're using clinical judgment and in-the-moment analysis, you're having flexible procedures. Does anyone know what this represents? The procedure commonly used. It's absolutely in Bill's book, the white book. It's on the task list. What? Not pre-Mac? Preference assessments, formal preference assessments. Paired stimulus preference assessment, MSW, MSWO, it's the gold standard, right? Everyone probably uses them. Graf and Crescent said that all of you use them. We don't in a progressive model. We use what we call in-the-moment reinforcer analysis, IMRA. In-the-moment reinforcer analysis, you're constantly probing and testing. You're probing and seeing. You're always looking at what could function as a reinforcer, what could not function as a reinforcer. There's no formal assessment done ahead of time. And if you don't think this procedure is real, go buy that 800-page book and go look it up because Bill has included it in the white book. To us, it's a more efficient way to teach.
Hold on. Sorry, I'm pausing so that I can focus on Minesweeper. So, so there's 12 left. So what's like the absolute minimum amount here? So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that would be 9 there, and then this could be 10. So if it were here, then that would be there and there. Oh no, wait, it can't be that. No, it could be, yeah. It could be 10, 11. Fuck. So there's one, there could be one, like, over here. Unless it was like this. So if it were like this, actually, hold on. Okay, 1. So 1, 2. Because there's 2 of them, it's actually irrelevant where this goes. So it could be, oh no, but this could be there, right? So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Fuck. Okay. I think it's just a forced guess, sadly. So I guess somewhere around here would be the easiest. And what would give me the most information? If it's one of these, it would give me the most information. So I'm gonna go here. Fuck. All right. Well, you win some, you lose some.
We also don't use formal preference assessments because we'd rather spend the time doing this.
Good, no, nice job.
Nope. We are not watching these kids. This kid did not consent to this being used this way.
Time to expand reinforcers, having fun.
The cones or the shark? Cone. Okay, cool. Ooh, what should we do with them this time? How about Nemo? Oh, Nemo again, okay. Oh, you want to put them on your feet this time? Yes. That's pretty silly. I'll put one on this one.
Taking the time to expand reinforcers, having fun, being engaging. This is why I want to spend the time out, having that flexibility in those procedures. Now, because some of you value research, we have research on it. I'm going to take a Pat Fryman approach and say, there's a study, go read it or come contact me, but I'm not going to go into detail about it. There's several studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals on conditioning reinforcers for individuals with autism. Another example of a flexible procedure is our cool versus not cool procedure.
Alex, today we're talking about saying cool things.
Nope. We're skipping this. Okay, hold on. What did this say?
Awesome. Another example of a flexible procedure is our cool versus not cool procedure.
Alex, today we're talking about saying cool things or saying silly things when talking to a friend, okay? All right.
Okay, so to be clear, the what they're talking about is it cool things or silly things? Does this have a transcript so that I don't have to do this? Is there no? Why don't videos have transcripts anymore? Yeah. Why are closed captions are unavailable live? Whatever. I'll watch this off stream, but I imagine this is gonna be like basically saying, you know, this is what you're allowed to say and this is what you're not allowed to say.
Things. Cool things, that's right.
a fun procedure. And just so you know, we're working on that with Alex because he was doing that in school and his teacher wasn't really appreciative of it. Research on it. Along with the flexible procedures,
What was he doing in school? I'm not gonna watch now to find out because this kid did not consent to it being used this way. So
it is imperative to have meaningful, functional, and applied curriculum. Within a progressive approach, it's not a cookbook approach. It's not like we just get one of the books, one of the many books that has been talked about today, and just stick with only that book. You need a library of books to help out. It's not like we only use just the VB map or the Vineland. It's a battery of assessments. And most importantly, is that therapists can think outside the box and create their own programs.
by the way, I've read a lot of these books now. They are so bad. They're so bad. They took transcripts about. What do you mean they took transcripts? The just the other day, I saw someone on stream using a transcript. Like there are still transcripts, just not all videos have them.
It's a battery of assessments. And most importantly, is that therapists can think outside the box and create their own programs. Here's a program that my colleague Christine Milne created to work on multiple skills.
All right, you are gonna be watermelon.
Nope.
To implement this meaningful curriculum, you have to have well-trained staff. I want to be clear. We should not be allowing 40 hours of training and professionals are set loose on kids. 40 hours is not enough. I know that my colleagues and I have the #1 most used RBT training in the world, and I say ad nauseum, this is not enough, and I mean it. 40 hours is not enough. In fact, I don't have a number of hours because it's not time-based. It is competency-based. You should only be working with children when you are competent in behavior analytic procedures to work effectively with children. And that is a hallmark of progressive ABA. It's the joy that I have, and John has, and Ron has, and John over there has, and Letty, and Sandy, and Tracy, and Rick, that for years, we have seen some of the most talented staff come through our doors. For years, we see what quality training could lead to. It's them who are really the geniuses of what, at least I do. They're the ones that do the work. I just get to go up here and talk. It is their work that makes the improvements. If you're wondering, and you have to take a quick picture of this or go on Behavior Live, these are just some of the characteristics, that it takes to be a quality staff member, to implement high-quality behavioral intervention. Now, my colleagues and I have also been working tirelessly on creating a new certification to improve those standards. We have one for an autism professional, which is already out, and by next year at this time, we will have 2 new certifications, one for a supervisory level and one for an interventionist level, all around progressive ABA, all as it relates to autism, and not simply a multiple choice exam. There's gonna be a performance portion of the exam. You're gonna have to show that you can implement ABA if you wanna be an interventionist and get the certification, or that you can supervise those to get the supervisor exam, to us raising the standards. And when we see this, when we see these pillars being implemented, we see amazing outcomes. And I'm gonna end today on one final video of just an example of the outcomes we see.
Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Not looking at that.
I know when we implement quality ABA, progressive ABA, we help children, adolescents, and adults reach our fullest potential. I hope today has left you inspired and that we can all come together as one to increase and improve the standards in our field so that children and families will benefit directly. Thank you so much for coming today.
Oh. Fuck. Autoplay is on. Alright. Hold on. All right, let's hear a story about this guy, okay? This was originally posted on Facebook. It's now on Twitter. Hold on. Can I just put this here? Can I just put this here? Will this will this display? It does display. Let's go. So, all right. So this is from somebody who ran an ABA Facebook group. So In June 2020, I was admitted to the hospital in critical condition after obtaining a life-threatening bacterial infection that had consumed 100% of my abdominal flesh. Jeez, that's it's hardcore. Um, During this period, I was an admin of a popular Facebook group, Do Better, Now Listen, Learn, Lead, with my friend and mentor, Megan DeLeon, rather. We had recently begun approving more controversial posts from the autistic advocacy community as we felt these difficult conversations were imperative for the maturation of our field. There were many BCBAs, which is board certified behavioral analysts. So like basically the top of the top that you can get for ABA. Um, there were many BCBAs who vehemently disagreed with this position. One BCBA D, I don't know what D means, in particular, seemed to take it quite personally. Justin Leaf, which is the guy in this thing, privately messaged Megan and me demanding we take down posts made by others, as he also privately messaged several of the autistic posters. He made threats to report many of us. In July 2020, Dr. Leaf then sent an email outlining his many concerns and requests to meet with Megan and myself. It was co-signed by several of his peers and publication co-authors. Quote, although I was in serious condition... Oh, sorry. This is just the quote. That's part of the thing. Although I was in serious condition and highly medicated, I feared for consequences if I didn't make an effort, so I logged in with my camera off. I didn't have to worry about participation because he did not allow us an opportunity to speak anyway. We were met with many demands for how to admin the Facebook group. Remember, this was autistic people being able to post on the Facebook group about their concerns. That's what all of this was started from. There was a follow-up email dictating all the expectations for us to meet in order for the potential ethics report to be withdrawn. We were given 48 hours. So that he submitted an ethics report against these people for the Facebook group, which was allowing autistic people to post. I advised I was still in the hospital and had just experienced my 13th surgery. I was running out of antibiotics and things looked dire, so I would be unable to meet his demands in the 48-hour time constraints demanded. This was the response I was given. Dear, person's name, thank you for responding to our email. I am sorry to hear about your medical issues. We certainly wish you a speedy recovery. We would urge you to report your inability to practice as a behavior analyst to the board, as you are ethically bound to do. Based on your response, it appears you would not like to meet with us to seek an acceptable resolution to our ethical concerns. We appreciate your taking the time to tell us why, but at this time, since we are unable to meet to get a resolution, you are ethically obligated to report our concerns as they have not been resolved. Or we are ethically obligated to report our concerns as they have not been resolved. Again, third time, maybe fourth time, this is over the fact that she had let autistic people speak in a Facebook group. All right? This is what this is all over. Again, we hope you're feeling better very soon. And now they're demanding, like, she's almost on her deathbed, that she meet with them to resolve their concerns. In December 20th, 2020, I was notified by the BACB, the Board Association something or whatever. This person had indeed submitted a 50-page ethics violation report. Pausing here for now. We'll add the rest later. In the meanwhile, learn about Justin B. Leaf. Yeah. So, okay, continuing now. So I will just repeat the last sentence. Yes. So, had indeed submitted a 50-page ethics violation report. In it was mostly screenshots of autistics voicing their concerns in the Facebook group, along with my effort to encourage everyone to interact professionally and from a place of curiosity. I had also shared my own early career experience with ABA that I felt was harmful. It outlined why I felt passionately about changing certain interventions and approaches now. I was clear I believe in the good our science can do. So again, this person is an ABA person, right? So not even like biased against ABA. but I know firsthand the harm it causes when used incorrectly. Megan received a notification she was also reported the same day. I spent hours putting together my response, although I was still in a very fragile state. I heard back from the board of something or other, the BACB, within 30 days. They investigated fully and found no ethical violations or wrongdoing. Megan received the same feedback. I felt so relieved. Finally, I could move past this threat and focus on my health and bonding with my toddler son, whom I had been away from for months. 2 months later, I received a certified letter in the mail from my state licensure. The identical ethics violation report had been filed to Kilba? I'm guessing the people who certify her. After the BACB found no wrongdoing. It was signed by Dr. Leaf and his co-authorship team. So this guy, after being after she was cleared of wrongdoing from the board, they went to her state licensure instead. So I submitted my prior response along with the BACV's findings. Within 2 months, I was notified that they found no wrongdoing either. To be clear, not one, but two governing bodies reviewed all of the allegations and submitted evidence, and both separately deemed that there was no violation or unethical actions. I thought maybe now, nearly a year later, we can finally move on. But things didn't end there. I was then reported to my employer, where I was later let go due to my advocacy to humanize our field. I am single, partially physically disabled mother, and I was left unemployed. During this time span, I have had all co-signers of the ethics reports blocked from social media. I even changed my last name to Sunshine on my social media apps to help protect my identity. I have not had a single interaction with any of these behavior analysts in 4 years. I was notified yesterday that the same, which is 2024, so this was last year, that the same BCBADs who wrote to me when I was hospitalized and so callously reported me when I was physically unable to meet their demands had now taken their concerns to academia and peer-reviewed literature. Many of my neurodivergent colleagues and colleagues and allies were named in this article. I was named along with the Facebook group Megan, and the same post previously reported to the BACB and Kilba back in 2020 to 2021. So not only did Justin Leaf report this woman, get her fired eventually, but also he then wrote a paper about this Facebook group. What these authors failed to disclose is that they had already reported this exact same content to our governing body years ago, and it was dismissed with no wrongdoing. Their article asserts that I am unethical and harmful to our field. This is damaging to my professional credibility and to potential employers. This has evolved past social media disagreement and has had real-world consequences for me. Enough is enough. I stayed silent for 4 years. The behavior of these privileged behavior analysts with self-funding to dominate our literature is harassing, unethical, and libel. It is 2024. There are more compassionate behavior analysts who stand with me than against me. I proudly own my decision with my statements, blah, 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 blah. Right? So, yeah, so, and this, yes. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it here, but that's, you know, so this is the kind of person that the guy we just listened to actually is. He is fiercely against hearing what autistic people have to say, despite what he says in this talk, that we need to be concerned about, autistic people and their quality of life. When that's only when autistic people are behaving the way that he wants them to. When they're voicing their concerns over ABA, now that's a bridge too far. So this guy's a piece of shit, basically. And to be clear, like, I think he is representative of the field. I know that the person we just read said that he doesn't, that there are more behavior analysts that stand behind her, but the fact is that they cite his research. He is widely cited. He has a grip over the field, and he dictates its public reputation. So, if he doesn't want to make the field look bad, then maybe he shouldn't be its public-facing representative, and he shouldn't be the one saying that his approach is better than everybody else's. You know? God. Yeah, this guy's a tool. He's a piece of shit. Damn, I've been going for 2.5 hours now. So, yeah, that was horrifying. And maybe that gives you a little bit of a preview of the kind of stuff I'll be covering if and or when I do a video on ABA. Probably not the personal stuff, but more so the stuff about ABA itself. So, yeah, that's it for now. Tomorrow, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know if I'm gonna stream tomorrow, or today technically, but next stream will probably be more Latour. I'm gonna try to get Envy is Political back onto stream, because I had a lot of fun with her last stream, and I would very much enjoy reading with her again because she has a lot of insight into Latour. So, we'll see. But thanks everybody for stopping by. I appreciate it.